time, let's bring in the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Republican Congressman Ed Royce of California. Mr. Chairman, thanks very much for joining us. What's your reaction to the fact that they say progress is being made, but they need more time? Big deal or little deal?
Well, I think the administration is not at the point that they thought they would be at here, because these four major issues of dissension, they expected an agreement with Iran on these and then thought that they would be extending the technical issues. Instead, on all four of these issues, the Iranians are pushing back. And as a matter of fact, it looks like we're actually losing some ground. For a while, it seemed as if the question of what would be done with the enriched uranium might be one that would be decided by taking that enriched uranium and having it refined in another country, in Russia, for example, so that we wouldn't have to worry about the stockpile being in Iranian hands. And likewise, we had a question about the extent of the enrichment. Now they've got a new supersonic centrifuge, which is 6 times faster, that they developed in the middle of this negotiation without us finding out. So these are very concerning issues, especially to the French, who want the IAEA inspectors to have the right to inspect anywhere, anytime.
The president's critics are now suggesting he seems to want a deal with Iran more than the Iranians want a deal. You believe that?
Well, I think we need, Wolf, as you know, my feeling has been we need more leverage to get that deal out of Iran. And that's why I believe that the legislation that I and Eliot Engel had passed by a vote of 400 to 20 through the House, and the administration was able to stymie that last session in the Senate, I think that would have given the administration the additional leverage they needed to force the Ayatollah to make these serious concessions in the nuclear program. But without that kind of leverage, I don't know that we end up at that point.
Stand by, Mr. Chairman, because we have more to discuss, including new indications. The Saudis may pursue some sort of nuclear weapon if they're not happy with what this deal has from Iran. Stand by. More with the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee right after this. We're back with the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Congressman Ed Royce of California. We're following the breaking news on nuclear talks with Iran being extended at least for another day. Mr. Chairman, the Defense Secretary, Ash Carter, he now says a military option will, in his words, remain on the table. Here's the question. Do you support, if necessary, a preemptive military strike to take out Iran's nuclear facilities?
Well, that is the position that the President of the United States also articulated, and I think it's one that the United States, that we all have supported as being on the table. The question is, can we put the types of sanctions on Iran that would give them no choice but to make significant compromises and end their nuclear weapons program? If we can do that, we've got an alternative. So I think it's important to point out there is this very real option of doing to the regime what we did to South Africa, which is put the sanctions on of the type that would really collapse the economy and say it's not being lifted until the inspectors can go in. That's the right answer.
Let me read to you from a story in today's New York Times, and I'll put it up on the screen. With another major aid recipient, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia is also expected to step up its efforts to develop a nuclear bomb, potentially setting off an arms race in the region. That from David Kirkpatrick, writing in the New York Times. As you know, the Saudis, like the Israelis, the Emiratis, a lot of others, they're really worried about this potential deal. Do you see the possibility that if Saudi Arabia or Egypt or other countries in the region don't like this deal with Iran, they could start developing their own nuclear program?
Well, here's why it's so concerning. And I and Eliot Engel had lunch with one of the Gulf state ambassadors who shared with us maybe your administration is ready to allow Iran to become the hegemon in the Middle East, but we can't afford to be. Now, what does an ambassador mean by we can't afford to be? Increasingly, we see references from Saudi Arabia to UAE, Turkey, Egypt. We see these references that indicate that they may be considering steps. And this is why we have to solve this problem of not allowing Iran to go forward. Secondarily, Iran has now opened up a front in Yemen where they have overthrown a pro-American government there, and Yemen is on the Saudi boundary, the border. And the concern on the part of the Saudis is that Iran will also support this low-level insurgency among a Shia minority in Saudi Arabia to try to overthrow the government. Recently, there was a comment by a senior Iranian official to the effect, we control 4 Arab capitals today. He was referring to Yemen, Beirut, Damascus, and to Baghdad. And he was saying, he was intimating that there would be additional capitals that would fall. And this is what has the Saudis so nervous, in my opinion.
I know they're very nervous. And when I interviewed Adel El-Jubeir, the Saudi ambassador here in Washington last week, right here in the Situation Room, he refused to rule out some sort of Saudi nuclear capability if, in fact, this deal, they hate it and it finds them endangered. Here's what also worries me, Mr. Chairman. I remember covering the White House during the Clinton administration when Bill Clinton reached the deal with North Korea to end its nuclear program, and he said this. Listen to the president.
Today, all Americans should know that as a result of this achievement on Korea, our nation will be safer and the future of our people more secure.
Well, for a variety of reasons, including North Korea cheating and working around that deal that was achieved at that time. We all know the end result, how that deal worked out. North Korea now has at least 1, maybe several nuclear bombs. So here's the question. Based on that, you lived through that period as well. You were a member of Congress. What's the lesson the U.S. should have learned?
I think we should have listened to the Undersecretary of the Treasury, Stuart Levy, who was looking at this problem and designed a program to put the type of sanctions on North Korea. And if you recall, for a while he did that because he caught them counterfeiting $100 U.S. bills. So as Treasury Secretary, he went in, put the sanctions on, and the regime just came to a halt. The dictator couldn't pay his generals. The missile program came to a halt because they didn't have the hard currency to pay for it. The State Department leaned in, this would have been during the Bush administration, and convinced Treasury or overrode Treasury and lifted those sanctions in return for promise of additional negotiations. But Levy's point was this: let's shut down their economy and leave it shut down until they agree to allow the inspectors in anywhere, anytime, to see if they're cheating. And I think it goes back to that fundamental bottom line. You've got to be prepared to do that and cut off their hard currency and collapse the economic system. Levy was right. We should have done it. We should have kept that on with North Korea as an example to the Iranians. We didn't, and now the Iranians have stolen the playbook from North Korea, I believe.
All right, Chairman Ed Royce of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.